Hello, my family. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? I love seeing our beautiful community gathered from all around the world. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share, because tonight's story, my people, this one will hold your chest. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1, The Man Who Waited in the Fog. There's a kind of cold that doesn't just touch your skin, it sinks into your bones. That's the kind of night. It was the kind that makes the whole world feel abandoned. The cemetery sat on the hill behind the old willow trees, the branches hanging low like tired arms. The moon was a thin slice, barely bright enough to see the path. The air smelled like frozen soil and old stone. I had been visiting my husband's grave every week for 3 years. But that night, everything changed. When I reached the gate, I noticed something I had never seen before. A faint glow, soft, flickering, almost like a candle flame struggling against the wind. My heart tightened. No one came to that grave. No one. People barely came to his funeral. So who was here now? I walked carefully, my boots crunching over the frosted grass. With every step, the fog thickened. It curled around my legs, rose past my knees, and slithered across the gravestones like it had a life of its own. The deeper I walked, the quieter the world became. No wind, no owls, nothing. Just the sound of my fear in my chest. When I reached the top of the hill, I stopped, because someone was sitting at my husband's grave. A man, still, unmoving, like a statue placed there by the night itself. He sat with his back slightly hunched, one hand resting on the stone, the other holding a small lantern. Its weak golden flame cast long shadows across his coat. I whispered, "Hello," but he didn't react. Only when I stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of the lantern, did he lift his head. Slowly, too slowly. "Excuse me," I said, my throat tightening. "That's my husband's grave." The man rose to his feet. He was taller than I expected, lean but strong-looking. His coat was old, worn at the edges. His boots were muddy. And his face looked like someone who had been running from something for years. His eyes, especially, those eyes were tired in a way I can't describe. He nodded once, respectfully. "I know," he said quietly. His voice was rough, low, almost cracked from cold. I swallowed. "Then why are you here?" He took a breath, slow and deliberate. "I promised him," he said, "promised him that one day I would tell you the truth." My blood ran cold. "What truth?" I whispered. He stepped back, giving space, as if afraid he might frighten me further. "The night he died, the man said something happened, something no one told you." I shook my head. No, he died in an accident." "That's what they told you," he said, voice firm but gentle. "Doesn't mean it's what happened." The lantern flame flickered sharply as if responding to his words. He looked past me, scanning the fog around us, like he expected someone else to appear at any moment. "You shouldn't be alone here," he murmured. "Not tonight." The way he said it, the tone, my heart squeezed. "Who are you?" I asked. He hesitated, just long enough for fear to ripple through me. "A friend," he said finally. "A friend of your husband, one he trusted with his life." My breath hitched. "He never told me about you." "He couldn't," the man said, "for your safety, for his." My knees weakened. Safety? From what? He looked toward the grave again, sadness pulling at his expression. "He wanted to tell you," he whispered. "But the truth, it would have destroyed everything." I shook my head, tears pricking my eyes. "You're lying." He wasn't hiding anything. He was a good man. "Yes," the stranger said softly. "He was. That's why he died." My entire body went cold. The fog around us seemed to thicken, swallowing the edges of the world. The lantern's glow looked smaller, weaker. He looked at me with a kind of sorrow I had never seen before. "There's something you need to see," he said. "Something he left behind. Something hidden." My voice trembled. "Hidden where?" He pointed, not to the grave, not to the trees, not to the gate, but to the dark woods behind the cemetery. "In there." I felt my chest tighten, fear clawing its way up. "Why should I trust you?" I whispered. He stepped closer, holding the lantern between us so I could see him clearly, because, he said, voice low and trembling with memory, "I was there the night he begged for your forgiveness." The world stopped. Everything inside me cracked. What did he ask forgiveness for? I asked. His answer came softly, like a confession carried by the wind. For the truth he was forced to bury. Chapter 2. The Map of Secrets in the Trees. The stranger held the lantern between us, its warm glow trembling against the cold fog. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, loud enough to drown out the silent cemetery around us. "What truth?" I whispered again, though my voice barely carried. He didn't answer. Not immediately. Instead, he began walking slowly toward the line of trees behind the graveyard, the dark, silent forest that locals avoided even in daylight. I froze. That forest. People said it swallowed sound. Some said it had rooms of silence, pockets where even your breathing felt too loud. "Wait," I called out. "I'm not going in there unless you tell me." He turned, his face lined with exhaustion, grief, and something I couldn't quite name. "You already know something was wrong the night he died," he said gently. I opened my mouth to argue, but the words never came. Because deep inside, I did know. There were things that never made sense that night. The time of the accident, the missing hour on his phone, the message I'd gotten days earlier, the one he claimed was a mistake, and the way the sheriff avoided eye contact at the funeral. I swallowed hard. "Tell me," I said. "I will," he replied. "But not here. It isn't safe." Safe? In a cemetery? In the fog? At night? My breath clouded in the air as he stepped in the first row of trees. "Please," he urged softly. "Come, I need to show you before someone else does." Someone else. A chill slipped through my ribs like ice water. Still, I followed. Inside the forest. The fog thinned the moment we crossed under the trees. Strange, almost like the forest rejected it. The air was colder, sharper. The branches overhead formed a kind of archway, natural but too perfect to be accidental. The stranger's lantern cast a golden circle around us as we walked, illuminating old carvings on the bark. I noticed the first one on my right, a letter, carved deeply, A. Then, a few steps later, M. And then, 19 scratched faintly into another tree. "Are these dates?" I asked. He didn't respond. We kept walking until the trees grew so tall they blocked out the moon entirely. The world became a tunnel of black wood, roots, and cold air. Finally he stopped. "This is where it begins," he said. I looked around. Nothing but trees. "What begins?" I asked, frustrated, scared, tired of half-answers. He held up the lantern and pointed to a tree with bark darker than the others, almost blackened. "Your husband was taken from the road," he said quietly. "He didn't crash. He didn't lose control. He didn't die where they said he died." My breath caught. "What are you talking about?" He placed his gloved hand on the tree. This was the last place he stood. Alive. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "My husband was here?" I whispered. The stranger nodded. He came looking for something he buried years ago, something he never meant for anyone to find again. The wind hissed between the branches. "What did he bury?" I asked. Before the man could answer, He knelt and brushed away the layer of frozen leaves and dirt at the base of the tree. Beneath it was something I didn't expect, a symbol carved into the earth itself. 6 lines crossing in the center. A shape like a star, but broken. I stepped back. What is that? A warning, he said, and a map. My skin crawled. A map of what? He looked up at me, shadows cutting across his face. Of the people responsible for his death. The trees creaked around us. And worse, he added quietly, of the secret he died protecting. I shook my head, heart pounding. What secret? What could possibly be worth his life? His voice lowered, becoming almost reverent. Your husband wasn't the man you thought he was, but not in the way you fear. He paused. He tried to save you from something he was trapped in long before he met you. I took a shaky breath. You're saying he lived a double life? No, the stranger replied softly. I'm saying he survived one. Barely. My legs felt weak. He stood again, the lantern casting eerie shapes on the roots around us. And now, he said, it's your turn to learn the truth. I stared at him, terrified, desperate, trembling. What do you mean? He lifted the lantern higher, because the same people who came for him. He took a slow breath, are looking for you now. The forest fell silent, completely silent. Not even the trees dared to move. Chapter 3. The House That Listened at Night. The walk back from the forest felt longer than the walk in. Every step echoed with everything he'd said. The map, the carvings, the warning, and that final, heavy truth. They were looking for me now. By the time we reached the graveyard again, the fog had thickened into a low white wall, curling around the stones like quiet hands. The stranger stopped at the edge of the path, as if crossing into town again meant stepping into danger. This is as far as I go, he murmured. I turned toward him, the cold biting the tips of my fingers. You can't just leave me with that. I need answers. He nodded slowly, but he didn't come closer. You'll get them, he said, inside your house. Tonight. A chill drifted down my spine. Inside my house. I opened my mouth to ask what he meant, but he stepped back, fading into the fog like the graveyard itself swallowed him. And then he was gone. Just like that. No sound. No footsteps. No lantern glow. Gone. The walk home. I don't know how long it took me to reach my porch. The cold felt different now. Sharper, like a breath, pressed against my neck. Every house on the street was asleep, dark windows watching me like silent eyes. My own house looked the same as it did when I left. Porch light flickering, the wooden step that always creaked, the old brass mailbox hanging by a single screw. But when I approached the door, I felt it, that feeling a person gets when a room has been opened or entered, a faint warmth slipping through the cracks, a shift in the air, like someone had been standing just behind the door not long ago. I unlocked it slowly. Inside, the house greeted me with stillness, the kind that doesn't belong to an empty home, but a waiting one. The hallway lights flickered once. A subtle draft slipped down the stairs. And then something even stranger. A faint scent, one I hadn't smelled in years. Pinewood soap, the exact soap my husband used. I froze. That soap had been thrown away after he died. I remembered doing it myself. The bottle cracked, the label half torn. I threw it out because the smell made me cry every time I walked past it. But the scent drifted through the hallway now. Fresh, soft, undeniable. Hello, I whispered. My voice didn't echo. It sank, swallowed like sound was being absorbed by unseen walls. I stepped deeper inside. Something in the living room. The living room lights were off, but the moon slipped through the window enough to paint everything in pale silver. My eyes adjusted slowly, settling on the familiar layout. The couch, the bookshelf, the framed photos. Everything looked ordinary until I blinked. Something was on the coffee table. A small object, rectangular, dark. I moved closer. My breath caught in my throat. It was my husband's old voice recorder, the kind he used when he worked at the community center, logging meetings and interviews. It had gone missing the week he died. I reached for it with trembling fingers. A thin layer of dust coated the surface, except for one clean line across the top, as if someone had touched it moments ago. I pressed play. Static. A crackle. Then his voice. My husband's voice. If she's listening to this, it means they found me. My stomach dropped. I stumbled into the couch, knees weak. His voice continued, shaky, afraid. I didn't want you caught in this. I hid everything for years. They warned me to keep quiet, but I never thought they'd. The audio cut sharply, like someone grabbed the recorder mid-sentence. Then another voice came through. A man's voice. Deep. Unfamiliar. You shouldn't have left it here. I slammed the stop button. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Because that second voice, I had heard it before. Not recently. No. Years ago. On the night of the accident. A memory flickered. Faint but real. A man yelling in the background during the phone call. My husband saying, "Not now. She's on the line." And then the call dropping. That was the voice. The same tone. The same coldness. The same man who had been with him just hours before he died. And now his voice was on a recorder that had magically appeared in my living room. The edges of my vision tightened. I looked toward the stairs. The shadows seemed deeper, thicker, like they were hiding something. The sound upstairs. A floorboard creaked. Upstairs. Slow. Heavy. My breath hitched. Is someone here? I whispered. Silence answered. Another creak, closer to the top of the stairs now. Not just the house settling. Something moving. Breathing. Stepping. And then a whisper. Not words. Just a breath. As if someone stood just out of sight, leaning into the darkness. I clutched the recorder in my hand. My husband left a message for me. Someone else left a warning on top of it. A stranger in the graveyard told me I wasn't safe. Now someone was in my house. The final floorboard groaned, and the shadow at the stairway shifted ever so slightly. Someone was coming down. Slow, deliberate, unhidden. My throat tightened. I stepped backwards, heart hammering against my ribs. The shadow moved again. One more step, and then another. Chapter 4. The man who stood in the dark. The shadow on the staircase thickened, stretching down each step like it had weight, like it belonged to something solid. I held my breath, my fingers tightening around the recorder until the plastic creaked. Whoever was up there, they weren't rushing. They weren't hiding. They were descending with intention, as if they wanted me to hear every step. Another footstep, then another. Slow, measured, heavy enough that the wood groaned under each shift of weight. I took a step back until my calf hit the side of the couch. Please, I whispered, just tell me who you are. Silence, utter silence, not even breathing, until a faint click, almost like a soft metallic tap. My heart stopped because I knew that sound. It was the sound of the loose railing at the top of the staircase, the one only someone leaning on it would make. He was standing there, right at the top, listening, watching. The moonlight shifted as a cloud drifted by outside. For a split second, the silhouette sharpened, enough for me to see broad shoulders, a coat, the edge of a collar. Not my husband, not the stranger from the graveyard. Someone else. Someone who had been in my house long enough to walk the upper hallways long enough to know the weak floorboards, long enough to hear the message on the recorder before I did. My throat tightened with fear. "What do you want?" I asked, louder this time. And finally, a voice. Not a whisper, not a threat, just a calm, low voice that vibrated with a weight I couldn't place. "I'm not here to hurt you." I froze. His tone was so controlled, so careful, almost like he'd practiced it on the walk down. "Then why are you in my house?" I managed, because he said, taking one slow step closer, "You've listened to the message." My chest tightened. The voice, the second voice on the recorder, the one that said you shouldn't have left it here. "Are you the one from the recording?" I asked. He paused on the step. "Yes," he said softly, "but not for the reason you think." He took another step, the lantern glow from the window catching the edge of his face for a split moment, enough for me to see dark eyes, tired lines, and something like regret. I tried to warn him. The man said, "I told your husband not to come back that night. I told him not to get involved again." My heart dropped. "Again? What do you mean involved again?" I asked. He let out a slow breath, the kind that carried years of something heavy, guilt, anger, helplessness. "He made a mistake years ago," the man said, "a mistake someone else buried. And when he tried to fix it, they came for him." I shook my head. My husband wasn't involved in anything like that. Yes, he was. The man cut gently. "And he kept you out of it for a reason." Every part of me went cold. This stranger was speaking like he knew my husband personally. "What was the mistake?" I asked. "What did he do?" He stepped down until only 5 steps separated us. "It wasn't what he did," the stranger said quietly. "It was what he witnessed." The air thickened around me. "Witnessed what?" I whispered. He looked directly at me, not with anger, but with a kind of sorrow I didn't know how to interpret. "The night he died," the man said softly, "wasn't the first time they tried to silence him. It was just the first time they succeeded." My knees nearly buckled. The recorder slipped in my hand. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "You're lying." I wish I was," he murmured. 2 more steps down. I tried to protect him. I tried to stop them. But when he went into the woods that night, I knew he wouldn't come back out. The room spun for a moment. "You knew." My voice cracked. "You knew he was going to die. Why didn't you?" I followed him. The man said, raising his voice only slightly. "I tried to pull him out. But he hid something in that forest he should have burned years ago. Something they've been hunting for a long time." I felt sick. "What did he hide?" I asked. He reached the 3rd step from the bottom. "You already saw the carvings," he said. "So, you know part of the answer." My stomach twisted. "You saw me in the woods," I whispered. "Yes." "You followed me?" "Yes." The room felt like it was shrinking. "Then why didn't you stop me?" I asked. His voice softened. "Because you deserve to know everything, and because you're already in deeper than you realize." My pulse hammered in my ears. "What does that mean?" I said, my voice barely audible. He reached the last step. "One of them came to your house 2 nights ago," he said. "They were looking for the same thing your husband hid." I staggered backward. "No, no one came here." "Yes," he said gently. "That is why the air was disturbed when you walked in, why the scent upstairs changed, why the window latch was opened." I felt the blood drain from my face. Someone had been here. Someone had touched my things. Someone had walked my halls. He stepped off the staircase, entering the full glow of the moonlight. Tall, worn, haunted. "I'm the only one trying to keep you alive," he said softly. "But I can't do that unless you tell me something." My hands trembled. "Tell you what?" His eyes locked onto mine. "Did your husband ever give you a box?" "A letter. Anything he told you never to open." My breath froze in my throat because he had a box, a small wooden one, hidden in the attic, locked, sealed with wax, and I hadn't touched it in years. The man watched my expression shift, and something like alarm flickered across his face. "You have it," he whispered. I couldn't speak. "You have the box," he repeated. "Then they're already closer than I feared." The room went silent, utterly silent, and the chapter ended with one truth. Whatever was inside that box, my husband died trying to protect it. Chapter 5. The Stranger's Promise. The wind had picked up by the time I reached home, carrying with it that restless hush that always sweeps through the valley before midnight. I locked my door twice, then a third time, even though I knew locks meant nothing to a man who sat beside a grave, as if he belonged there. I didn't sleep, not even for a second. Every creak of the house felt like a whisper. Every shadow felt like a memory stepping too close. By morning, I made my decision. If this man truly knew who buried the truth, if he really knew what my mother hid all her life, then I needed answers before the truth swallowed me whole. So I returned to the graveyard. The frost was thicker that morning, and my breath hung like smoke as I walked between the crooked stones. The grave, the one he sat beside the previous night, looked untouched. No footprints. No sign of anyone sitting there for hours telling secrets to the dead. But there was something new, a folded scrap of paper, held down by a small stone. My name written in a shaky hand. My heart hammered once. Hard before I reached down and opened it. "Tonight, midnight, the old church ruins. Come alone for your mother's truth." I closed my eyes. There was no going back. That night, the church ruins looked even darker than I remembered, towering stone ribs of a building that had burned decades ago. My flashlight beam trembled as I stepped over fallen beams and weeds that grew wild like tangled secrets. He was already there, sitting on a broken stone pew, hands clasped, shoulders hunched like a man carrying something heavy enough to break him. "You came," he said softly. "I need answers," I replied. "No more shadows. No more graves. Tell me the truth about my mother." He nodded, but his expression twisted with a kind of pain I didn't understand. "She wasn't who you think," he began, "but she also wasn't who they wanted her to be." His voice echoed in the empty stone hall. "She did something decades ago, something she tried to protect you from. The guilt ate her alive, but she carried it anyway. She left clues, pieces, hoping one day you'd be strong enough to know." My throat tightened. What did she do? He looked at me, then, finally, and I saw a lifetime of grief behind his eyes. "That grave," he whispered, "the one I sat beside." I waited, breath caught in my chest. "That's where she buried the proof." Silence. Cold. Heavy. Unmovable. He stood, reached into his coat, and pulled out something wrapped in cloth, delicate, almost ritualistic. He held it out for me. "This belonged to her," he said. "She asked me to guard it until you were ready." Hands shaking, I unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a small metal box, old and dented, sealed with rusted hinges. "My mother," I whispered, voice cracking. "She left this for me?" He nodded. "And what's inside will change everything you think you know. About her, about your family, about what she spent her whole life hiding." The ruins groaned as the winter wind pushed through broken windows. My pulse thundered. "What's in the box?" I whispered. He stepped back into the dark. "That," he said, disappearing into the shadows, "is for you to open. And when you do, you'll understand why I said I knew who buried the truth." And before I could speak, before I could breathe, he was gone, leaving me alone in the ruins, with a box that felt heavier than the world. Chapter 6. The Box That Broke the Silence. The walk home from the church ruins felt longer than any journey I had ever taken. The metal box weighed almost nothing in my hands, yet somehow it felt like I was carrying an entire lifetime, my mother's fears, her secrets, her mistakes, and her truth. Inside my house, I locked the door and drew the curtains. I placed the box on the kitchen table and just stared at it. It stared back, old, rusted, wrapped in the last instructions of a mother who could no longer speak for herself. My hands trembled as I pried open the latch. It snapped louder than I expected, echoing through my empty kitchen like a gunshot. Inside were three things: a letter addressed to me, a newspaper clipping yellowed with age, a photograph with the edges burnt. My heart began to race. I opened the letter first. My child. The handwriting read, my mother's handwriting, shaking and uneven. If you are reading this, then the past has finally reached you. I swallowed hard. There are three truths you must know. I leaned closer. First, I lied to protect you. Second, they never forgave me. Third, someone still watches, waiting for you to uncover what I could not bury deep enough. My eyes burned with tears. What had she done? What had they done to her? I unfolded the newspaper clipping next. It was an old article reporting a missing girl decades before I was born. A girl around my age. Same eyes. Same face shape. My breath caught. The headline read, "Local girl disappears. Last seen with family friend." Under it, circled in shaky pen, was a name. The stranger's name. The man who sat beside the grave. My hands went cold. Finally, I lifted the photograph. The edges charred as if someone tried to burn it. It showed my mother, much younger, holding a small child. But the child wasn't me. And beside her stood the stranger. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Was that child the missing girl? Was my mother involved? Was he protecting her? Or hiding something darker? Before I could form another thought, a sound echoed outside, crunching footsteps in the snow. Slow, deliberate, too close to be casual. My heart slammed against my ribs. I moved to the window and pulled the curtain slightly back. A figure stood at the edge of my property, still, silent, watching the house. The same silhouette from the graveyard. The man who said he knew who buried the truth. Only now I understood something. He didn't just know who buried the truth. He knew why. And he wasn't leaving. Not until I opened every door my mother spent her life trying to keep closed. I clutched the box to my chest as he took one step closer, then another, and slowly disappeared behind the trees, as if reminding me, this story isn't finished. Not for you, not for me, not for the ones who never came home. The wind howled through the night, and I finally realized some truths are buried in graves, some are buried in families, and some come knocking when you least expect them. If you enjoyed this story, my dears, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next mystery. Your support keeps these stories alive. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep your lights on tonight.